Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for this live webinar about what is stakeholder orientation with Kip Tindell and Alexander McCobin. Before we begin, I want to invite those that are on their computers to please click on their visual interface link that was sent in the reminder email, which will take you to the presentation slides, where you'll be able to submit your questions throughout this webinar. And this is the second program in a series brought to you by a coalition of the Conscious Capitalism chapters, consisting of the Los Angeles, Orange County, San Diego, and Arizona chapters. My name is Maureen McComsey, and I am one of the founding board members of the Los Angeles chapter. Today, we have the pleasure to bring you this interactive interview with Conscious Capitalism pioneer Kip Tindell, who is the founder and chairman of the Container Store. He is also a longtime supporter and leader of the Conscious Capitalism movement. And a big thank you to Kip today for joining us, and we are just so delighted that you are here. Kip is also the author of the book, Uncontainable: How Passion, Commitment, and Conscious Capitalism Built a Business Where Everyone Thrives. During this interview, you will learn how Kip and the Container Store team bring stakeholder orientation model to life. Now, some of you may be asking, what is stakeholder orientation? Well, stakeholder orientation can be defined in part as the goal of an organization to benefit all the parties that are affected by the future success or failure of an organization. And unlike some businesses that believe that they exist to maximize return on investment for just their shareholders, companies with a stakeholder orientation focus on their whole business ecosystem, creating and optimizing value for all their stakeholders. They really get that a strong and engaged stakeholder leads to a healthy, sustainable, and resilient business. Now, companies with a stakeholder orientation take into consideration their employees, their customers, suppliers, funders, and their community as a life-sustaining ecosystem. But to be clear, this approach does include a healthy return to its shareholders. Now, Kip and Alexander will dive into what all this means during the hour ahead. So now, it is my pleasure to welcome Kip Tindell and to introduce you to Alexander McCobin, who is Conscious Capitalism Inc.'s new co-CEO. And he's doing a stand-up job, may I add. Now, thank you, Alexander, for taking the reins. And without further delay, I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Thank you so much, Marie. And thank you, Kip, for taking the time to speak with us today. I also want to thank all of the Southwest chapters for putting this webinar together. This is an incredibly exciting opportunity for us to really dive into one of the four tenets of conscious capitalism, stakeholder orientation. Before we get started with the interview, though, I want to encourage everyone participating to log into the social webinar for this conversation. If you are calling in right now, there is also a visual interface link you can click on in the reminder email you received a couple of hours ago. If you click on that, you'll be able to see the PowerPoint presentation that goes along with this, as well as write-in questions that you may have for Kip about stakeholder orientation or conscious capitalism, which you can do by clicking on the chat button on the bottom left-hand side. If you have any questions or confused about anything or want to recommend that we talk about a different topic, feel free to type it in. We're going to be tracking all the questions on the back end, and I'm going to present them to Kip as we go through this webinar. So with that, Kip, I want to thank you for all the incredible work that you've done with Conscious Capitalism, the Container Store, and being an advocate for business as a force for good in the world. And start off by pointing out that you've been a practitioner and an advocate of stakeholder orientation for a long time. What is your impression as to how this approach to conducting business has been perceived by the rest of the business community over the years, and how is the perception today versus what it was like 10 or 20 years ago?
Yeah. Hey, Alexander, and hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. And gosh, there's nothing I'd rather do than talk about my favorite cause, conscious capitalism. So thank you for being a part of it. And that's a great way to start it off, because we are actually making a lot of progress. If you think of this as a business philosophy, or if you think of this as a cause or whatever, 10 years ago, people would kind of roll their eyes, and it was almost, I was afraid they were going to break out in Kumbaya type of song. It was almost a little bit embarrassing. When we did the road show, when the Container Store went public, I expected all of the Wall Street analysts and investors to not want to hear about this, not want to hear about conscious capitalism, the foundation principles, all of that. But instead, that's what they wanted to hear about more than anything. 8 or 10 years ago, lots of skepticism. Today, less and less and less. In fact, I've noticed that the people who are least sophisticated about business, say high school seniors that are getting ready to go to business school, are very skeptical, and the people who are most senior and most know the most about business, old CEOs and whatnot, almost no skepticism at all. One day, Raj Sisodia, the co-author of the book with John Mackey, Conscious Capitalism, and a dear friend of mine, and Raj is on the board of directors of the Container Store, we gave a speech to all the business deans of MBA programs across the country in San Antonio, and everybody was there. Harvard was there. Everybody was there. No skepticism at all about all of this. We just went through the whole conscious capitalism thing in detail. They were on their feet, roaringly approval, no skepticism. And the very next day, I did a speech to the graduating seniors of St. Mark's High School, the most exclusive boys' school in Texas, and these kids, are pretty well focused on grades and money, and I went to Jesuit, which is similar to St. Mark's, but I was just stunned at the difference. Just the simple comment that business is not a zero-sum game was met with just complete skepticism, and so I think it's interesting that the more you know about business, the more you believe in these things, and I think that because eventually a good capitalist is going to adopt that methodology which is most successful because of that fact, I think that we could all quit talking about it, and this is going to be the dominant methodology of doing business in the future anyway, because as Raj also pointed out in his book, if you look at the last 15-year period of the companies that he believes exemplifies conscious capitalism, best of all among the public companies that have been around that long, those companies outperform the S&P index like 14-1. And so that's very encouraging, and it's very helpful to have the academic community arm us with those types of statistics so that when we do still encounter some skepticism, we have data to reinforce that this is not altruism. This is actually a profit strategy that results in better financial performance than the other way around.
That's great to hear that so many people are starting to adopt this perspective, and I think your comment is very insightful that people who practice business more and are deeply involved understand that this is the right approach to take.
I think they intuitively sense that. They intuitively sense it because they do have so much practical business sense. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. So I'm curious, what was your first experience with stakeholder orientation in business?
Well, one of my favorite people in the world is Ed Freeman, who's really kind of the father of the stakeholder management theory. He's at Darden. Ed is just a wonderful Renaissance man, kind of a Brillo pad beard and a Brillo pad hair of head. Everything he touches, he's a master chef. He's a master musician. He's one of these people that life comes very easy to him. And because he's a musician, he says that what we do as management is we harmonize, not optimize. He likes the word harmonize the employees and the customers and the shareholders and we harmonize what they all get out of our efforts and out of our business. As only a musician would come up with that word, and really reading and meeting him. We've always done it this way at the Container Store. Our foundation principles is identical to kind of the tenets of conscious capitalism. And so it wasn't until really kind of reconnecting with John Mackey, who most of you know, John and I were roommates in college bizarrely enough. And I'd always heard that he kind of had a lot of business philosophies like ours, and then that led to the Ed Freeman thing. And so that was the first time that I realized that other people that we didn't have that much close association with were sort of engaging in very similar business philosophies. And I mean, I'm still figuring that out. I mean, I was lucky enough to have dinner about a month ago with Sir Richard Branson, and he and I started, it was with Joe Biden in a very small dinner party, and we started talking about the similarities between Conscious Capitalism and Branson's B Team. And, you know, I didn't know that much about that before. I gave a speech in New York. I'm chairman of the National Retail Federation, and so I got to interview Colin Powell. And Colin Powell could be a major member of our conscious capitalism community. I mean, the guy, his whole philosophy on life is based in this. So it kind of started with Mackey and Ed Freeman, but it seems like every month now I meet somebody like a Colin Powell who's as enthusiastic about this as you and I are, and that makes me very happy because, well, Bill Clinton, you know, was running around the world for a couple of years there giving a speech that was roughly entitled, "Charity won't save the world, business will." And that's because business is 100 times bigger than charity. So economics and business are so forceful and powerful that if we can actually change the way people do business, then we really can change the world because it's just so huge.
Absolutely. So we've been talking about the general approach of stakeholder orientation so far, creating value for all stakeholders involved in a company, not just one. But let's try and illustrate this a little bit. Can you give us some examples as to how taking this stakeholder approach has led you to decisions that would have been different if you had taken a different perspective of business?
Well, you know, hopefully that's an every day, every hour thing. One that comes to mind, as a retailer, I really love the Container Store is known as an employee-first culture, and we really and truly are, you know. We really think that if you truly take better care of your employees than anybody else, I mean, if you really take better care of them than anybody else, they really and truly will take better care of the customer than anybody else. You know, if those two people are truly ecstatic, well then, you know, your shareholders got to be ecstatic. Your vendor, everybody's got to be ecstatic. So the Container Store has a lot of credit for its relationship with its employees. Fortune magazine's been running around for 16 or 17 years saying that we're one of the best companies to work for in America and all of that. But I'm really very proud of our relationship with our vendors as well, and I love that almost as much as the employees. In fact, you can't tell the difference between a vendor and an employee around here. The closeness and the relationship is so similar. But we had a company called Iris, who's now our second largest vendor, and they're basically a Japanese company. I established a really close relationship with its founder and CEO who spoke no English. We constantly had interpreters around, but they had a factory in Wisconsin, and we began to do a lot of products together. And at this point in time, Iris is probably about the 50th most important vendor to the Container Store. And I mentioned that, you know, big plastic storage items, that's what the mass merchants compete with us on. They really don't have, I mean, the vast majority of our product is exclusive and proprietary in nature, so nobody has it. But what Target and Walmart and those guys tend to do is they tend to get into the big plastic tubs, big plastic storage stuff, and Iris does a lot of that. So it's a little bit of a low margin arena for us. And I was saying, well, the problem is, you know, your factory's in Wisconsin and we're in Texas, and you know, we need to figure out a way around that. Big plastic storage is very freight intensive, and the relationship went on, and it's a very competitive field, big plastic stuff. Long story short, they wound up building a factory here in Dallas just to serve our needs, based on trust, based on relationship, based on our foundation principle of filling the guy's basket to the brim. Making money then becomes an easy proposition. Well, what was so amazing about that is I don't know of any retailer-vendor relationships where the trust would be high enough for him to put the machinery and equipment and infrastructure. For all he knew, we might switch to Sterlite, his major competitor, the next day over a 5-cent price differential or something. There was no contract. There was nothing signed. It allowed us to compete with the mass merchants on his products, and allowed us to then create a bunch of new products that were exclusive to us. And they went from being the 45th or 50th most important vendor to us to the second most in vendors. So it meant tens of millions of dollars of increased business to him, and was perhaps one of the biggest, best business decisions he made in his whole, in the history of his U.S. Business. And you can imagine how that brings you, close together. So figuring out what you can do for each other to get that win-win relationship is thrilling. It leads to great relationships. My wife happens to be the chief merchant. We have these decades-long relationships with all the key vendors. I mean, we go on vacation with them, and then we go off to this island and create the world's most perfect shoebox or most perfect sweater box. And that gives you a competitive advantage that nobody else has. That's how you get innovative product at a great price that people can't really knock off very, very effectively. Obviously, you're going to find the person that can do that type of product better than anybody else. And in the early days, we used to sometimes buy a shrink wrap machine for a small vendor that couldn't afford it, and then they would amortize that out at a nickel a product. It's thrilling, and it's kind of like love in that you sort of expose yourself, and you can certainly be hurt, but what you get in reciprocation is usually kind of what makes the world go around. And I think these types of win-win, synergistic, mutually beneficial relationships are what makes if love makes the world go around, these kind of relationships make the business world go around. And the people that are making the most money are the ones that have the best of those types of win-win relationships.
That's a really powerful story, and it almost sounds like when you show that love and care and adopt this stakeholder perspective, that your stakeholders adopt the same perspective and reciprocate back to you, your employees and your vendors caring as much for you in return.
Yeah, and it's not only the most profitable way to do business, it enriches your life and the lives of the people you do business with, so kind of makes you want to work all the time because it's so enjoyable. I like to talk about Claude Monet painting the water lilies. Was he working or playing? He was doing what he wanted to do. And so this type of practicing business, I think, leads to joy and, yes, love and relationships that make doing business almost like playing or something. It's very fun. It's very enjoyable. Not only enriches your life and the life of the people you do business with, but also I think it's easier to be successful in business if everybody wants to see you win. People love the Container Store. Most of our vendors say, "Oh, you're my favorite customer." The communities, when we built this distribution center that I'm in now, the city of Coppell gave us the best tax advantages they'd ever given anybody because they loved our business philosophies. And they said, our community values are like your values. It's easier to win at business if everybody wants to see you win than it is if they're staying awake at night trying to figure out how to get back at you. You know what I mean? So I think it's pretty much that simple. The first 25% of any employee's productivity is mandatory. They have to do that or they get fired. But the next 75% of any employee's productivity is completely voluntary. They only give that in direct accordance to how they feel about their boss, their culture, their product. And so it's easier to win in business when your employee productivity is in the 80s or 90s than when it's 26%.
So that makes a lot of sense, but not everyone always shares that view. And I think a lot of people on this call are interested in the practical means of applying this approach. So I want to ask a few questions that really focus on situations where it might seem difficult to apply stakeholder orientation.
Okay.
I'm curious, have you ever worked with any other managers in the Container Store who didn't share this philosophy? And if so, how did you handle that?
Yeah, well, running your business according to the tenets of conscious capitalism is not always easy. And you have to convince lots of people along the way, partners, investors. In terms of internal managers, most people that just can't get their arms around this wind up leaving on their own. They kind of roll their eyes and think we're nuts, and they leave and go to work for an insurance company or something. I don't know. Which I'm not saying insurance companies can't have this, but most frequently the stakeholder that is not sharing that approach is going to be some type of equity shareholder, and that's because, as most of you know, the shareholder kind of gets paid last, right? The vendor gets paid, the employee gets paid, everybody gets paid, and it's only at the very end that the shareholder gets paid. So they're the ones that most frequently doubt it or want to step in and take more or grab more or whatever. And so very important to have not just the CEO and the top management people indoctrinated with this, but you must have your shareholders, and they're the hardest ones sometimes to understand that, and it's because they get paid last. And I don't see that many people not sharing it anymore. Analysts on Wall Street are kind of getting to where they know about this stuff. As we talked about at the beginning of the hour, everybody, in direct proportion to how much knowledge they have about business, tends to understand that this is not the same as just, I'm not interested, as we say, we're not interested in how much of your money you give away to a good cause. Let's talk about how you made your money in the first place. I mean, that's what's important. And so a company gets the investors and the stakeholders it deserves, and I just don't see a lot of that. I mean, if you talk to Jim Sinegal, the Costco guy, great example of all of this, and he pioneered. Boy, people might call me a pioneer or John Mackey a pioneer. God, guys like Jim Sinegal. Guys like Herb Kelleher. Herb Kelleher told me 35 years ago that, Kip, it's much easier to build a great business on love than it is fear. And I thought, oh, wow, who is this guy talking about love in the workplace, And so, I think it's easy to get around the very few people who just don't share it, don't believe it. You can win them over. Some people are incapable of loving in their non-business lives, so maybe they're incapable of ever figuring this out in a business thing. But we have more and more and more examples of why and how it works better than the other approach. More and more advocates for servant leadership. Servant leadership is an inherent part of conscious capitalism that I don't think really gets talked about enough. But what happened was that mostly males, went off to World War II, and when they came back, they started businesses, and they tended to build those businesses in accordance with the philosophies that they learned in the military. And running your business with that militaristic top-down approach is not good. It doesn't work. It's a terrible way to run a business. But that's what it may be a great way to run a military. I don't know. But and now the people that are still adhering to that type of business philosophy, are more and more starting to not dominate their niches. They're starting to kind of lose the game, and the more conscious capitalists, servant leadership type leaders are beginning to be the ones that are doing the best. I mean, look at any category. I mean, I mentioned Southwest Airlines. There's a good one. I think it's true that they've made more money or done better than any of the airlines. Costco pays its employees almost double, very close to double what their closest competitor pays theirs, and they do a lot better. I mean, they're kind of winning that game. They do a lot better than their closest competitor. Over and over, you see that type of thing, and we're all just sitting on the sidelines, cheering those people along. Whole Foods is getting a lot of competition right now, but for for decades. They've been dominating the niche they created. Danny Meyer, another board member of the Container Store and one of my favorite business people, that he's got Shake Shack. In fact, I'm going to his Shake Shack store opening in Dallas tonight, which is going to be great. But Danny wrote a book called Setting the Table, that I think is one of the best business books ever written. It's not about food and wine, although it sounds like it. It's really about enlightened hospitality and conscious capitalism and servant leadership. When Danny talks about enlightened hospitality, he kind of changes what the rest of us think of when we hear the word customer service. So that's a good one too. I don't, like we started off talking about, there's just, thank God, there's fewer and fewer people that reject this type of thing. If you employ them, I would tend to have them move on to an environment that they can deal better with, and the others, I would say, try to avoid. If you stick to your guns and really believe in this, you'll wind up with shareholders and other stakeholders who really do believe in it, and those are the ones you deserve, not those.
That's great. Now, even if everyone that's working with you adopts this perspective, there could foreseeably be situations where one stakeholder group thinks that it's not getting enough benefits as another. Customers want lower prices, or employees think that they should have more benefits, or something like that, where they might seem to adopt a zero-sum perspective again. How do you reconcile any conflicts like that if they do come up?
I think the best way is just through communication, leadership, maternal or paternal approach to dealing with those issues, trying to lift that stakeholder up on Maslow's hierarchy of need. Maybe they need to be hugged. Maybe they're cold. Maybe they're hungry. I don't know. They need something. And taking it as a personal challenge to get that person to feel more safe and secure and warm, so that they can look more outwardly and quit looking so selfishly and inwardly, and patiently understanding that a rising tide raises all boats, or whatever trite thing you want to say. A little nurturing, a little loving. Sometimes I'll treat a certain vendor. In my mind, I think I'm a princess this person for a while. I'm going to treat her just like a princess until I get her up there to where she's not so whatever. And that usually works. There's people that it won't work with. But if you take it as a personal challenge to where you need to change the perception through communication and everything, this person's getting less than they really are. And as you know, it's often a person who's getting more, probably. And some people are more difficult than others. And so before you quit doing business with them, I think a little hugging can sometimes go a long way. I know that sounds idealistic, but practically and repeatedly, I find that to be what I just said, the most successful path to that. And you and I have both dealt with people that you're just never going to change. And so then I think you have to maybe find somebody else to do business with.
I really like that, though, and I think it actually highlights the interplay between the different tenets of conscious capitalism, how a stakeholder orientation supports and builds off of conscious leadership and creating a conscious culture throughout the organization. So I really appreciate that perspective.
Yeah, it's and you can't feel sorry for yourself while you're doing that. You have to be on a mission. You have to get it done.
So would you say that having this stakeholder orientation is more expensive or less profitable than any alternatives? Some people might think that when you take this orientation, you're leaving profits on the table in some way. Has that been your experience at all, though?
Well, no. I mean, that's of course what conscious capitalism actually stands for. This gives you a competitive advantage. It makes you more money, not less money. It's not like we're taking we're being nice and then taking 5% of the profits and doing good things with it. Creatively crafting a mutually beneficial relationship with your vendor means that you're going to wind up with much higher gross margins than if you take the other approach. One of my favorite business principles is to make sure that those products which you have the highest volume in are also your highest margin. At the Container Store, we have that. All of our best-selling products are also our highest margin products. You're given the economic incentive to perfect the selling methodology of those products which are your highest volume. So most businesses are the exact opposite. You have your commodity products, your highest volume or your lowest margin products. But the way to make them your highest volume and your highest margin products is to perfect the win-win relationship with the vendor of those products, and to work together to figure out how that can be achieved. And so then you're training your employees more on those products, you're marketing them more, you're developing, and the same with an employee. I'm not an advocate of paying mediocre people well. I'm an advocate of paying great people well. The average retailer, and with my involvement with the National Retail Federation, I'm always embarrassed to give this quote, but the average retailer in America spends 8 hours a year training a first-year employee. We're crazy enough at the Container Store for that number to be 276 or 278, something right in there. That's more than 8 hours. 276 is more than 8. And yet what happens then is that you have marvelously trained people who really care and know and understand how to solve a customer's storage and organization problem. Maybe this toy storage area is driving me crazy. And they stick around. I mean, people join this company and they never leave. So that person that helps you solve your toy storage problem in the North Park store has probably been there 11 or 12 years or something, and they really can help. So in every stakeholder case, you can afford to pay an employee more because you're going to get 3 times the productivity and only 50 to 100% more compensation. That's one of our foundation principles. 1 equals 3. We only hire great people. We train them better than anybody. Part of the training is cultural. A lot of it is foundation principles. A lot of it is conscious capitalism. And then you wind up with someone who can do 3 times the productivity, and it only costs you, well, a lot less than 3 times, maybe 50% more in compensation than somebody else might do. But you can't get that at minimum wage. You can't get that at $11 an hour. You can't get that type of longevity, productivity. Ultimately, that salesperson cares about that customer's needs. And we don't sell items, we sell solutions. And solution selling is much more complicated than item selling. And so that's what it's all about as you view the employee as that stakeholder. As we've indicated, as you view the vendor as a stakeholder, or the community, or the thing I love about Ed Freeman's stakeholder philosophy is that theoretically the supplier to the school's lunch program where your daughter goes to school, that person is a stakeholder of yours. The whole concept of wake, that everything you do and everything you don't do impacts not only your business and the people around you, but the ripple effect way down is just important to understand that. And I think that people in businesses that do understand the power of their wake, W-A-K-E, like a boat's wake, are the people that do the best in life and in business. They're certainly the people that you enjoy being around the most. How do you like being around these crass individuals who seemingly have no impact of the impact they have on the people around them, or businesses that do the same? In fact, the true definition of a psychopath is something pretty close to somebody that doesn't understand the impact of their actions and words on the people around them. And so then being mindful of your wake is the polar opposite of that. Those are the kind of people that you want to work for. Those are the kind of people you want to partner with. Those are the kind of people you want to do business with. Those kind of people you want to live with.
That's powerful. So I want to encourage anyone on the webinar right now, if you have any questions, please click the chat box on your bottom left and type them in. We're going to start to get to audience questions soon. But Kip, for anyone on this call who agrees with stakeholder orientation, wants to begin implementing it in their business if they haven't done it already. If they were looking for an overly simplistic 3-step process to do it, what would your advice be?
Well, communication would have to be at the forefront of it. One of our foundation principles, again, is that communication and leadership are the same thing. So I think that you've got to have a great communication in order to employ these tenets of conscious capitalism or to get that across. I mean, you just won't believe how much time it takes for I think CEOs are overrated by society and Wall Street. CEOs are important, but God, you read these analyst reviews of a major company, and you would think there's only one person working there, the CEO. So they're not that important, but they're very important at certain things, and setting the tone. That CEO has to completely be immersed and completely believe in and spend a ridiculous amount of their time making sure that the conscious capitalist approach and the business philosophies and everything are happen, because there's always going to be a good meaning store manager that's going to try to protect the company by underpaying everybody. And, that hurts the company. It doesn't help the company. There's always going to be a cautious, good-meaning employee who's going to be afraid to unleash people to use their own creative, beautiful genius and intuition. They're too restrictive. They're too militaristic for that. So you get more robotic employees who aren't filled with enough heart and soul to really be creative and productive. Communication is certainly one. Taking that approach that one great person is equal to 3 good people in business productivity would be a second one. Hire only great people, and then develop them and treat them like great people and trust them, and that would have to be number 2. And it's an understatement. You're 50 times better at a lot of things than I am, and I'm 74 times better than you at certain things. And I always joke that the only 2 things I'm really good at are fishing and organizing closets. But I can really fish. If you and I go fishing, I'm going to catch 30 times more fish than you do probably if you don't know how to fish. And I don't mean to sound conceited, but I just said I'm only good at 2 things. But it's so. And the other thing is, don't you love working for a company where everybody around you is great? They're 1 equals 3 great, as opposed to just kind of disengaged and not. So I'm going to have to really think about the third one, but I think communication, hiring only great people so that your employees and your vendors get to deal with great people. But mostly you look forward to getting out of bed and going to work in the morning, because you get to work with people that you just can't believe you're lucky enough to work with. Yeah, that's number 2. Number 3, I'm going to think about that while we go on to the next question. Usually when I say, how do you sum up the Container Store's culture, I talk about communication and hiring great people. And I think it's the same for conscious capitalism and servant leadership.
A 2-step process is better than a 3-step. It's a lot simpler. But what I like about that is...
The reason we only have 7 foundation principles is because the priest at Jesuit high school taught me that people can't remember 10 things, because, everybody grows up, lots of people grow up in this Judeo-Christian thing, but no one can name all 10 commandments. So try it sometime. Ask your cousin or your aunt, and they can only come up with about 7 or 8. So 7's too many. So hopefully we can remember 3, but I guess 2's better than 3 too.
What I think is interesting about the 2 that you emphasize as well is that it really is focused on the human element of business. It's the people that you're working with and the executive really taking leadership in establishing the values and the culture of the organization and making sure people are working closely together. So it's not just the strategy or the product, it's all about the people that are involved in the business.
That's what makes life worth living, and that's what makes a business wonderful. That's why I like the retail industry. I think it's more people-oriented than most businesses. I also think that because of the product, it's got a lot of great creativity to it too. So, but I won't try to recruit anybody here to the retail industry, although I do spend a lot of my time trying to convince the best and brightest kids coming out of school to go into retail. I just think it's more fun. I think it's more enjoyable than going into a lot of other professions, and that's part of what the NRF does. So.
Great. So I'm actually curious, you mentioned a few other companies in this conversation already, but what are some more that you think are employing stakeholder orientation effectively and are good examples for people to look into?
Barry Wehmiller is a good one. Barry Wehmiller, it's Wehmiller, Barry, B-A-R-Y. And he's going to speak, what's his name?
Bob Chapman.
Bob Chapman is going to speak at our CEO conference upcoming. And it's just so beautiful. The guy takes these downtrodden businesses that are just practically failing, usually like in the Rust Belt somewhere or something, industrial type things, and the employees are so beaten down and they're so unhappy, and he buys a company like that for a song, right? He doesn't have to pay very much for it. And then by focusing on the tenets of conscious capitalism, particularly focusing on the employees and building them up, for the first time, I mean, they're starting to walk a little taller. They're starting to feel better about themselves. Unfortunately, we place too much emphasis of our self-worth on what we do for a living. And so these poor people working for these companies feel as they do. So then they're not nice to their golden retriever. They're not nice to their spouse. But then after he does the opposite of that with them, they're nicer to their golden retriever. They're nicer to their spouse. And they're also vastly more productive at work. And so Bob Chapman and I have spent a lot of time talking about, well, this is how you improve the world. One downtrodden employee at a time. You elevate that person, and then they feel so much, and then they treat the world around them completely differently, and yes, they're much more productive. So Barry Wehmiller is a great example of it. A little company here in Dallas called TD Industries, plumbing. They do HVAC and plumbing type work, and the leaders of that company, and I always joke about what we're doing is we're teaching a bunch of plumbers conscious capitalism and servant leadership. You wouldn't think that would be a subject that plumbers would really get off to, but it has led them to have a competitive advantage over any other plumber company around or HVAC company around. And every time a truly notable great building gets built in Dallas, TD Industries is the one that does the heating and air conditioning there. I just can't say enough about Costco, because I think that he really kind of helped condition Wall Street to some of these thoughts. Southwest Airlines we mentioned. I think I'm going to get to have a dinner with Herb Kelleher next week, and I just feel like tape recording everything the guy says. Herb Kelleher is where he is because the Southwest Airlines founder, he's just smarter than anybody else in Dallas. In my opinion, I've lived in Dallas long enough to know a lot of smart people. I think he's the brightest guy in Dallas. And what he's done with that airline is just amazing. And it's almost impossible to be good to your people in the airline industry, because labor is the whole deal. So if your labor cost is slightly higher than somebody else because all the customers care about in that industry is the lowest fare, it makes it very, very difficult. But when I sit in the back of the Southwest Airlines plane, I still to this day hear the flight attendants tell stories about Herb. Oh, I saw him once stop and help a lady fix her flat tire right outside her office. He didn't know her. He just did that because that's the type of guy. I fly other airlines just like you. I don't hear people saying nice things about their company. Do you? I mean, I feel like that they hate their company and they take it out on me every time I fly them. Totally opposite situation with Southwest Airlines. So those are some. I think Google is another good example. Hopefully you guys come to the CEO conference, and so you see all these representatives of companies there that are practicing this or trying to practice it, particularly since the book Uncontainable came out. I get emails and texts several times a week from somebody that says, I have this natural dry cleaning type business in Atlanta, and I've based the whole thing on your conscious capitalism stuff and all of that, and it's doing really well. And so there's lots and lots of sort of startup and smaller, newer companies that are doing it. But then you have people like, what's her name at Pepsi-Cola, trying to change even Pepsi-Cola. Indra, I never can get her name right, but the CEO of Pepsi-Cola is really devoted to this type of thing. And so big companies, small companies, it is much harder to take an existing successful company and turn it into one of these than it is to start, one, or to take a small one and kind of bend it into more of this. But like we said at the outset of this conversation, I really think that someday in the not too distant future, most companies will lean towards more and more of this. And, nobody's perfect. There's things that Costco does that I don't. A lot of companies that are considered the best conscious capitalist company, maybe they don't treat their vendors very well, or maybe this one doesn't treat their employees as well as they should, or whatever. But like human beings, we're all imperfect, and so you kind of, in order to pitch a big tent, you got to let a few sinners in, or you're going to have a very small tent. And so I think it's important to recognize a business for the fact that they are generally behaving this way, and not nitpick on the fact that maybe they're not perfect in all aspects of it. I feel that way when I'm at a board meeting at Whole Foods and we have activists, and I'm going, what are you bothering this company for? You should go bother that company. We're pretty good at that.
So we're starting to get some questions from the audience, and we don't have too much time left, but hopefully we can get to a few of them. Alicia has written in to ask, from the outside in, how can the public determine whether a company is truly practicing conscious capitalism? For example, is there key language you might see in their marketing or operational information in their annual return that would prove they take such an approach?
Well, just by interacting, with the company, particularly its employees or its vendors, or seeing the types of products that it sells, I would enter into a relationship with a brand, noticing that certain things seem to be that way, and then the more immersed you get into being a consumer of that brand, the more insight you'll get into it, and you'll find some things that are might put you off, but I would be patient with that, and look for more. And so, if you decide that a certain hotel chain is that way, and you stay there once, after you stayed there 30 times, you'll know a lot more about it. But don't be insufferably picky. I don't know any companies that are completely perfect at this. So forgive them their little sins here and there, and just recognize how they do in comparison to their peers or their competitors. And I think it's kind of incumbent upon all of us as global citizens to vote with our pocketbook and reward those companies that we believe are that way. Don't be afraid to kind of trust your intuition on it. I don't think you can fake this. I think the ones that are not genuine will be figured out pretty quickly. And I think that it's not only millennials that are voting with their pocketbook. I think even baby boomers are starting to vote with their pocketbook a little bit. And it's absolutely valid, absolutely true that the companies that are the best at it seem to be doing better and better, and the ones that aren't are kind of, in many cases, beginning to lose out and sort of look a little bit like dinosaurs. And I'm pretty happy about that. It's starting to be, it's getting to where we can say things like that and people nod their head in agreement.
It does seem like this is becoming much more common practice, and it's really exciting to see companies like the Container Store and Whole Foods that have been advocating this for a long time proven right and well more accepted as a result of that. There is a question from the audience, though. What advice would you give to any executives that want to adopt a stakeholder orientation in their company but have trouble with their board of directors on the issue?
The composition of the board's really important. When we select a board member at the Container Store, we select a board member at Whole Foods. First thing we look at is culturally, are they a fit to the company's culture? number one. I don't care how great they are. I don't care how famous they are. Or that's the first thing we look at. And if that board member is already existent, well, then you simply have to attempt to make them see the benefits to the shareholder and to all the stakeholders of this methodology. So just really working on them, but particularly the selection of new board members or the existing ones. I'm pleased to say that the board members we selected on our board are very, very representative of conscious capitalism. I mean, you have Herb Kelleher said, "Oh, I'm too old to be on your board, but Bob Jordan's the best business person in America, so Bob Jordan's on our board." He's like number 2 or 3 guy at Southwest Airlines. Talked about Danny Meyer, Walter Robb. Many of you know Walter is the co-CEO at Whole Foods. Raj Sisodia we talked about. Carol Stern, she's the CEO of UNICEF. She has a book out that's called "I Believe in the Power of Zero." Carol Stern's trying to make sure that by the time she dies, no child anywhere in the world dies of a preventable illness, because most of them die of like dysentery and stuff. It's totally preventable, and so that's about as servant a leader, conscious capitalist as I've ever seen. And so, all those people are magnificently talented. Walter Robb's one of the best retailers in America, but first and foremost, he shares business philosophy with conscious capitalism and servant leadership in the Container Store. And so there's a guy that makes a great board member, and the board is incredibly important. But I think you have a lot of control over the values and attitudes of your board members and who they are, more than you do just some institutional investor that comes in and buys a lot of your stock. You can work on them too, but you got to start with the board.
Fantastic. So we're just about out of time, and I believe Maureen wants to give some closing comments, but let me just say thank you so much, Kip, for this really insightful conversation. I have pages of notes myself that I'm going to be referring back to afterwards, and I hope everyone else that's participated in this call has done the same. I hope you have a great time at Shake Shack's opening tonight. Enjoy the burgers, and I'm looking forward to seeing you at the CEO Summit soon.
Well, thank you, Alexander. I want to commend you on your great leadership, and welcome to this wonderful group of people, and thanks for your passion and your brilliance, and I look forward to working closely with you in the future, and all of you for joining this rambling but really fun conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kip, and Alexander. You both did such a great job in really kind of bringing this conversation about stakeholder orientation to life. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your experience with us. I want to also thank all of the 4 individual chapters, LA, San Diego, Orange County, and Arizona, for helping to bring this webinar to life today. We all share an interest in really activating conscious capitalism in our communities. And with this web series, we want to explore the 4 pillars of conscious capitalism and really bringing you these case studies and examples of conscious capitalism in action, like we did today with this stakeholder orientation one. On the screen, you'll see some websites of each of our chapters. If you can go to the next one, Adam, please. And we will invite you to explore, we really invite you to explore your local chapter and really consider joining us as members because and you can also connect with us via our Facebook, our Twitter, LinkedIn, and even Instagram. We're not quite yet on Snapchat, but I have a feeling LA could probably be the groundbreaking ones on that one. So we really invite you to consider joining or sponsoring your local chapter because so we can continue to grow this movement in your community. Each of these chapters provide their own unique events and their programs and high-quality networking opportunities to help you in your own conscious capitalism journey. And we really need and appreciate your support in building this thriving community within our cities. This webinar has been recorded and will be shared by each of the individual chapter websites. So be sure to be on the lookout for our future webinars where we will continue to bring you current topics and guest speakers around conscious capitalism. And for those that missed our last webinar with Doug Rao, who's the current co-CEO of Conscious Capitalism Inc. and the former president of Trader Joe's, as well as the founder of Daily Table, it is available on all of our individual websites. And finally, I want to give a big thank you to our hosting sponsor today, Maestro Conference, for their support and for providing this wonderful platform. And a big shout out for Adam for being our wonderful driver today. For more information about Maestro and to host your own webinar, you can go to their website at www.maestroconference.com. And if you're interested in sponsoring or have an idea for a future webinar, please do contact me at maureen@ccla.la. And finally, I just want to say a big thank you again to Kip and Alexandra and to all of you for spending your lunchtime break with us today. And we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maureen and everyone.
Thanks all.
Thank you, Maureen.